Alex from the Australian National Department of Young Scholarly Researchers. This segment of my work will examine how globalisation has impacted the political economy of China and what challenges might China's legal system present to an Australian firm looking to establish a presence there. Firstly, to begin with, let's grasp both the concept of globalisation and the concept of a political economy. Globalisation refers to the growing interconnectedness and interdependence of countries driven by technologies that enhance the flow of goods, services, and trade. Political economy can be defined as a field of study that analyses how political, social, and economic forces can shape a country's economic outcome. Primarily, according to Doug Guthrie's influential piece, China and Globalisation, globalisation has provided a mechanism through which the Chinese Communist Party has been able to reinforce their leadership on the international stage. A large part of China's emergence as a global superpower and highly influential state in the international order is owed to its policy of 1990, dubbed Go Global, that saw Chinese enterprises expand into overseas markets, beginning bilateral trade agreements with many economically prosperous Western countries that has essentially propelled China into its current position as a highly influential superpower. In 2017 alone, China attracted over $1.7 trillion worth of foreign investment, and in 2025, in the first quarter alone, has grown by 5.3%. Henceforth, it is clear that globalisation has provided a pathway through which China has leveraged, using both economic and coercive power to achieve political ends and contest the US-led dominance of the Western world. Whilst on the surface level, it would seem strategic for foreign businesses to invest in China, given that it is an ever-expanding market, the issue that international businesses looking to invest in China must remember is that China is a communist country and operates in a hybrid market. The CCP's leadership poses a challenge for businesses looking to invest in China because of issues like bureaucratic corruption that may increase the cost and complexity of operations and restrictions on foreign ownership. Furthermore, it is undeniable that China's economic prosperity has been supported by the impacts of globalization that have helped interconnect China's trade and investment with other countries, which has also served to foster the social development of China. In 2024, China's total export sales surpassed $3.58 trillion, with their biggest export sector being technology, more specifically electronic equipment like gaming and accessories, making it the world's largest exporter in 2024. Currently, Australia's largest trading partner is China, where agreements like the Free Trade Agreement has seen the volume of Australian exports to China grow by 143% between 2015 and 2023, signalling the importance that globalisation has played in allowing both nations to trade. From having only opened up its economy to globalisation in 1978, its accession to the World Trade Organization in 2001, and current position as the world's second largest economy with an estimated GDP of $19.23 trillion signifies that globalisation has propelled China to the forefront of the international stage. This economic development has in turn increased the quality of life for many people in China, a direct result of the impacts of globalisation. For instance, the average life expectancy has increased to 78.6 years. In the last 40 years, nearly 800 million Chinese people have been lifted out of poverty, with over 218 million people having a university education or higher. Whilst exact figures regarding social media use and living standards remain an estimation given data censorship, the IMF attributes the overall improvements to China's living standards to its ability to grow its economy through global interconnectedness. It may be difficult for an Australian firm to consider establishing a presence in China given the vast difference in the legal systems. Fundamentally, Australia's legal system is based on common law, where laws are created by judges through court decisions and precedents. Australia also has a concept called separation of powers to ensure that judicial systems are separate to the legislative systems, ensuring that politics and politicians cannot influence legislation. In contrast, China follows a civil law system, meaning that legislation does not have to be bound to precedents and that judges can play a more active role in determining the facts of a case. A consequence of this, however, is that the system is heavily influenced by communist ideals of the government, which may not always produce a fair or just result. Subsequently, issues like a lack of transparency and unpredictability within the legal system may result in Australian businesses receiving impartial rulings or unfair fines if it chooses to establish its presence in China. The implications to the business may mean that it has trouble running its operations smoothly or is burdened financially by heavy fines or taxes imposed by a legal system that is subservient only to its government.
Hello, my name is Jacob Dale, and I am a member of Andy's research team. I've been tasked to use my knowledge and research skills to explain to you why economic development is of greatest importance to an Australian firm considering opening a business in China.
Firstly, I want to acknowledge the Human Development Index as an important contributor for businesses looking at developing overseas. However, its lack of investment data that can otherwise be obtained through the gross domestic product, gross national income, and foreign direct investment, which are all economic development figures, far exceeds the relevance of levels of education and average life expectancy. To quickly summarise, average life expectancy and expected years of schooling are both better in Australia compared to China. However, China's scores are still high relative to other countries. In China, the average life expectancy is 77.95 years, and expected years of schooling is 8.036. The past few years of data has shown an increasing trend in the rise of China's HDI. For businesses wanting to expand into this country, this rise means that the population is becoming wealthier, healthier, and more well educated. Not only does this increase the purchasing power of customers, but also it creates a more skilled labour pool with better talent availability through advancements in education and training. Let's begin by looking at gross domestic product. If a business wishes to expand overseas into China, understanding the gross domestic product is critical. GDP is a form of economic development that measures the total size of an economy through the value of goods or services it produces. In 2024, China had a GDP of 18.74 trillion US dollars, which is the second highest in the world. If we compare these figures to Australia, there is a significant difference, with Australia's GDP only sitting at 1.752 trillion US dollars. However, it is important for us to consider GDP when it is measured relevant to the country's population, this being in the form of per capita. The population of China far exceeds that of Australia, and therefore the reason for such a discrepancy in GDP is a result of this population difference. Here is the data from the last 3 years for both China and Australia's GDP per capita. As you can see, in 2024, Australia's GDP per capita was far greater than China's at 64,407 US dollars, as opposed to 13,303 US dollars. GDP per capita is important to consider for businesses looking to invest overseas, as it determines the prosperity of a country based on its economic growth. GDP per capita data concludes that Australia has higher living standards, making it a more attractive market for luxury goods and services compared to China's market. However, China's rising GDP per capita should not be ignored, as it still presents significant opportunities for businesses. According to Bannerline, countries are likely to experience greater economic growth, resulting in a higher GDP per capita and a stronger industrial base when supported by business investment in research and development. This suggests that China will become a more favourable country for innovation-driven sectors such as technology and manufacturing if they continue to industrialise and invest in research and development. Additionally, China can be used as a strategic choice for businesses considering offshoring their production, with manufacturing making up 25% of its total GDP. However, businesses wanting to invest should be cautious of the reliability of China's GDP figures. Reports have found instances where local officials have manipulated data to meet growth targets, leading to discrepancies between national and local levels. Another economic development factor that is often more preferred than gross domestic product figures are the gross national income figures, or more commonly referred to as GNI. GNI measures the total income earned by a country's residents and businesses regardless of whether the income was generated within the country. It is measured in purchasing power parities, or PPP dollars as we call it, as this allows for equal currency conversion. In 2024, China had a GNI of 37.92 trillion PPP dollars, whereas Australia had a GNI of 1.872 trillion PPP dollars. If we look more closely at GNI and divide it by these two countries' total population, then we see that over the last 3 years, Australia's GNI per capita has been significantly higher and continuously increasing compared to China's. This economic development figure is important for businesses looking at expanding into China's economy as it shows how well developed a country is and can compare this development with institutional quality, freedom, and governance. Research claims that the most advanced countries are those with a higher GNI as they promote higher levels of economic freedom, supporting growth and innovation and making them a better place for investment. Similar to GDP, China's GNI is a reflection of its larger population, whilst Australia's higher GNI per capita reflects a greater average income. For businesses, this will mean that consumers will have less purchasing power, making it harder to sell niche products like they would be able to in Australia. The final economic factor that businesses should consider is foreign direct investment, or more commonly known as FDI. This measures the net inflow of investment into an economy. Over the past few years, China's FDI has dropped significantly from 190.2 billion USD in 2022 to 18.56 billion USD in 2024, whilst Australia's currently sits at 55.23 billion USD. This dramatic decline is largely due to unpredictable regulations, increased enforcement, geopolitical tensions, and rising labour costs. For businesses considering expanding into China, the relevance of the FDI figures depends on the industry and should be considered alongside other economic and human development factors.